Kauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Shunyavadi Paskatya Desitarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, 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 Hare Hare. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Bharavidakacharya Asadhara Siddhu Shri Sriman His Divine Grace Shalasi Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Gaur Premanande Haribol, glories to the sound devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Namo Vishnu Vidaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhute Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paskatyade Siddharne Om Agana Tunandasya Gananjana Salakaya Chaksur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Scha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sabadutam Vrijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vasakans Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karna Sindhu Dinabando Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Prashubhanu Siddhadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakapa Turvyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyevacha Patiranam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Pranitananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Bhagavad Gita chapter 15 The Yoga of the Supreme Person, text number 5. Nirmana Moha Jita Sangha Dosha. You can just 15:5. Nirmana Moha Jita Sangha Dosha Adhyatma Nitya Vinivrita Kama Dvandvar Vimukta Sukha Dukkha Sangar Gachant Yamuda Padam Avyam Tat Nirmana Moha Jita Sangadosha Adhyatma Nitya Vinivritta Kama Dvandvar Vimukta Sukha Dukkha Sangar Gachant Yamuda Padam Avyam Tat Nirmana Moha Jita Sangadosha Adhyatma Nitya Kama Avimukta Sukha Dukkha Sangha Adhyantyamuda Padam Avyam Tat. Ladies. Nirmana Mohadita Sangodosha Dhyatmanitya Vinivritta Kama Dvandvar Vimukta Sukha Dukkha Sangar Gachant Yamuda Padam Avyam Tat. Ni without mana, false prestige, moha, and illusion, jita, having conquered, sangha, of association, dosha, the faults, adhyatma, in spiritual knowledge, nitya, in eternity, vinivritta kama, vinivritta, disassociated, kama, from lust, dvandva, from the dualities, vimukta, liberated, Sukha dukkha, happiness and distress. Samgyai, named. Gachanti, attain. Amuda, unbewildered. Padam, situation. Avyam, eternal. Tat, that. Those who are free from false prestige, illusion, and false association, who understand the eternal, who are done with material lust, and who are free from the dualities of happiness and distress, and who are unbewildered, know how to surrender unto the Supreme Person, attain to that eternal kingdom. Purport. The surrendering process described here very nicely. The first qualification is that one should not be deluded by pride. Because the conditioned soul is puffed up, thinking himself the Lord of material nature, it's very difficult for him to surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One should know by the cultivation of real knowledge that he is not the Lord of material nature. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the Lord. When one is freed from the delusion caused by pride, he can begin the process of surrender. One who is always expecting some honor in this material world, it is not possible to surrender to the Supreme Person. Pride is due to illusion. For although one comes here, stays for a brief time, and goes away, he has a foolish notion that he is the Lord of the world. He thus makes all things complicated, and he's always in trouble. The whole world moves under this impression. People are considering the land, this earth, to belong to human society. They have divided the land under the false impression that they are the proprietors. One has to get out of this false notion that human society is the proprietor of this world. One is freed from such a false notion, becomes freed from the false association caused by familial, social, and national affections. These faulty associations bind one to this material world. After that, this stage, one has to develop spiritual knowledge. One has to cultivate knowledge of what is actually his own and what is actually not his own. When one has an understanding of things as they are, becomes free from all dual conceptions, such as happiness and distress, pleasure and pain. He becomes full in knowledge, then it's possible for him to surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Nirmana moha jita sangadosha adhyatma nitya vinivritta kama dvanvai vimukta sukha dukkha sangar gachant yamuda padam avyam tat. Those who are freed from false prestige, illusion, and false association, who understand the eternal and are freed from material lust, are done with material lust, are freed from the dualities of happiness and distress, and who, unbewildered, know how to surrender unto the Supreme Person, attain to that eternal kingdom. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutaya Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswatam Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paskatyade Sadharane. So again, Krishna is explaining the Sambandha, that our entanglement in the material world is due to our false ego. Due to the false ego of the mind, the living entity desires to lord it over the material energy. Or as Krishna had said in a different way, when Arjuna asked Krishna, Kama Esha, start with Shreyan Swadamo Viguna Paradharma Swanustitat Shre Dharme Dinam Shreyak Paradharmo Bhayavaha. That it's better, Shreya means it's better to perform one's own duty than to take up someone else's duty. Failure in one's own duty is better because to take up some other's duty is dangerous. In other words, if one does someone else's duty, one gets the reaction for not doing one's own duty, and then he also gets the reaction for taking up someone else's duty, taking on someone else's service that they're supposed to be doing. So Krishna wanted Arjuna to fight on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, but due to Arjuna's false ego, thinking that these are my relatives, he didn't want to fight. In other words, he was in the material concept of life, afraid of happiness and distress, absorbed in duality, being impelled by the modes of material nature to flee from the battlefield and neglect his duty because he was under illusion that something bad would happen. So Arjuna is wondering, now I've heard this philosophy, I've heard it's not a good idea to neglect your duty, but that's what that's what I'm about to do. So what's causing me to do this? I don't really want to do it. I've understood something, but somehow or another I feel impelled, obligated to do something I'm not necessarily enthusiastic to do. So Krishna says, Arjuna, Shri Bhagavan Vacha, Ta Kena, Arjuna asked, that was a Ta Kena Prayuktoyam, Papam Charati Purusham, Anicham Napi Varshneya Balad Eva Niyojita. What is this force that's impelling me? So Shri Bhagavan Vacha, Kama Esha, Krodha Esha, Rajaguna, Samudbhavaha, Mahashno Mahapatma Vidyanam Ihavarina. That is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with the material mode of passion, and later transformed into wrath, which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. So what we think is love or attraction, just like we may want to watch a movie. So we may not be in love with the movie. Oh, movie. We want to embrace them. But we have some liking and some taste. So we think it's perfectly normal. I just have an attraction for this. But Krishna doesn't agree. He says actually it's lust. But it's lust in a way that we think is respectable. Apparently it's not breaking the regular principles, and it's not really, it seems to be sinful. I'm not injecting heroin. I'm just watching this movie, that's all. But Krishna says actually, because it's not in Krishna consciousness, we're being impelled by the mode of passion for enjoyment. And later on it'll turn into wrath, because we'll feel that we're frustrated, we wasted our time. So Krishna says it's lust only, not that we're going to give ourselves, well, actually it's not lust, it was enthusiasm, my proclivity, I'm going to use it in devotional service in the next yuga. And we can be sure that if it wasn't in Krishna consciousness, although it may have started out as our proclivity, because everyone has a proclivity, everyone has an attraction for something in this material world, it's sure to turn into ignorance or into wrath, frustration after some time. That's just the way the material world works. And deeper on our delusion, our misidentification with our gross and subtle material bodies. And therefore we'll forget who we actually are, and we'll lose our intelligence, what actually we've understood to be Krishna consciousness. And we'll simply suffer more in the dualities of illusion. So Krishna tells Arjuna it's lust, and then it will turn into wrath. It's just inevitable. If we accept lust, we'll have to accept greed. And if we accept greed, then we'll have to accept anger. And if we accept anger, greed, and lust, we have to accept delusion. And then we'll forget reality. We may be able to memorize P to the 100,000th degree, but we'll forget who we are. So that's actual forgetfulness. Because they have techniques of remembering so many things, you can remember a book back and forward, but if you don't know who you are, then it's another phase of delusion. And if we're deluded, we don't know who we are, we forget who we are, whatever we do will be detrimental to ourselves and everyone else. Although we may think ourselves to be great heroes, but actually we're great fools. Because any activity which is not directed towards becoming Krishna conscious will simply give us another body in one of the 8,400,000 species of life. And we have to accept the miseries that go along with that. So then Krishna says that Kama Esha, Krodha Esha, Rajaguna Samudbhava, Mahashamo, Mahapatma, Vidyanami Havarinam, Dumena Vriyate, Vanir Yatardar Shomalena Cha, Itobe Navrita Garvas, Tatate Nadam Avritam. Just like the fire is covered by smoke, or the mirror is covered by dust, or the embryo is covered by the womb, so the living entity is covered by the different degrees of lust. So we're covered by lust, and how do we know it? Because we think we're this body, or this mind. Without being covered by lust, we can't be in delusion. There's no such thing as, I'm not lusty, I just happen to be in delusion. No, delusion is a symptom of lust. If you have smoke, there must be some fire. So if we're in delusion, caused by identifying and thinking ourselves with these gross and subtle material bodies, we must have a sufficient amount of lust, anger, and greed that's keeping us imprisoned. And there's different degrees. In the animal species of life, it's so much covering they can't even begin to understand who they are. But in the human form of life, the covering is life's like fire covered by smoke. So if the fire is made to blaze, then the smoke will go away. Otherwise the smoke will, if the fire gets dimmer, we have more smoke. So we utilize the human form of life to cultivate Krishna consciousness. Then if our consciousness blazes up, then the smoke of delusion will go away. But abritam jnana etena jnanino nityavarina kama rupena kuntiya dusprena analena cha. Thus a man's pure consciousness is covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire. So we feel impelled to do something. that means that that's the pratyatmika shakti, the impelling potency of illusion. We feel we have to do it. Or we just do it without even thinking why we're doing it. We just do things. So we're just being impelled by the modes of nature. And the result is that we're never satisfied, and we're always unsatisfied. And we're always feeling an anxiety. Something's wrong. I got to do something to correct something's wrong. And there's never sufficient corrections to not to feel an anxiety. And then Krishna explains more fully, Indriyani manobundir asyadishtanam uchate etaraviho mohadyatesha jnana avrityadehinam. Just the senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the sitting places of lust, which veils the real knowledge of the living entity and bewilders him. So Krishna explains how we've become situated with a lusty consciousness in our senses and our mind and our intelligence. Did Krishna wake up one day and say, I don't like your face? I'm going to throw lust, anger, and greed all over you. No, there's a process, and the process begins with hearing. Just like we come here and we hear about Krishna, trying to understand about Krishna, so in this society, in every society, throughout the whole universe, people are spending time hearing about Maya. We distribute a few books, and probably Amazon.com in Timisoara distributes thousands of more books than we do. And none of them probably deal with Krishna. So people are hearing about the glories of sense gratification in endless varieties. How great it is to go mountain climbing, how great it is to go skiing, how great it is to smoke cigarettes, how great it is to do all kinds of things. Go to this restaurant, it's great, go to it. You can eat pig's feet or something. Kiss the lotus feet of the pigs. And people are hearing about the glories, and there are, pictures, glorious pictures, and billboards, and people go there and they say, yeah, that was fantastic. I never tasted such a sweet pig foot in my life. And then people get excited. Let me go there and experience the same thing. It sounds great. So everything is based upon advertisement, and then people try it out, and they get some relief from their anxiety to experience what was advertised. And they call that happiness. Material world are advertising, creating some desire, and because we have that desire, we feel dissatisfied. And when we get that object that we thought we was dissatisfied over, then we feel satisfied that we got the object, and we think that's happiness. So we create our problems, and when we solve them, we think we become happy. It's like you have a toothache, and you feel miserable. But normally, that same tooth doesn't cause you any happiness, but when it's aching, you feel miserable. So then when you go to the dentist and he puts a cap on it or something, and the pain goes away, you think you're happy. It's not happiness, it's simply the end of misery, temporarily. So by this glorification of the material energy, especially sense gratification and fruitive activities, that I have $10 and he has 20, so I feel miserable because he has twice as much as I do. And then when I get 20, I also feel miserable because someone has 40 euros, twice as much as I have. So that way life, it goes on. Fruitive activities and sense gratification. I ate 3 globulins and my worst enemy ate 4, so now I feel unhappy. I should get one more. I can't let them have one more than I have. And so the soul has to make a decision, because we hear these glories, and therefore we have to make a decision what we want to do. We want to utilize our senses and mind to get. Now, people are glorified nowadays. They start out with nothing, and they work the whole life to make a fortune, and they're considered to be great heroes in society. Never mind how they made the money. and what kind of sinful activities they did to get their fortune, but because they started from rags and became riches, therefore they're considered to be elevated person. Never mind the Yamadutas have them as first on their list to pick up and bring to Yamaraj. That people have no intelligence to consider. In any case, people generally, they make a plan in the material world, and if they have big desires for especially fruitive activities, because sense gratification is always very limited. You can only take so much drugs and have so much sex, eat so much meat, and gamble and speculate so much, but you can accumulate unlimited amount of wealth thinking that you're doing something significant, defeating your enemies and validating your friends. Therefore, if one hears some glories and wants to satisfy it, the soul makes a decision, yes, I'm going to do that activity to gratify my senses, then lusty intelligence, because the soul is determined that he wants to utilize his intelligence to fulfill some aim, which is lusty intelligence, born out of hearing about fulfilling lusty desires, or angry desires, or deluded desires, greedy desires. So lusty intelligence, by lusty intelligence, the soul acquires a false ego by which he misidentifies himself with his mindless senses. So as I gave that analogy before, a man is walking down the street and he sees a beautiful woman, and his senses and mind say, go get her. She's the one. She's your soulmate. And she's walking along with a man, and so the senses say, go get her, but the intelligence says, wait a second, I read in some book last year, Bhagavad something, that's not a good idea, that dot on her forehead means she might be married and she has a man next to her. And so the lusty intelligence says, oh, forget about that. No one believes that anymore. That's the old fashion. People used to read books like that before, but no one reads those anymore or takes them seriously. Next, you're going to tell me about the golden rule. But everyone knows what the golden rule is nowadays, that he who has gold, they rule. So forget about all this philosophy and whatever else you want to come up with. Just go get her. You only live once. You should try to get everything you can, enjoy as much as you can while you're here, because soon you're going to disappear. So the soul says, all right, let's get her. Write her a letter. So the intelligence says, write her a letter, tell her she's the most beautiful thing you've seen, and in small letters, in the last 2 weeks. Tell her you're madly in love with her, that you're going to give her the sun and the moon, and if she's nice to you, you might give her a couple extra stars also. Tell her to meet you in such and such place at such and such time. But don't sign the letter, because that man next to her is twice as big as you are. So that way the soul becomes a servant of lusty mind, lusty intelligence, due to the fact that he's chosen to identify himself with the false ego and serve the mind and senses. On the other hand, if he actually read the Bhagavad Gita, and he knows that these are two spirit souls within the material bodies, and that they can become liberated if they get this Bhagavad Gita, then instead of making such plans, he goes up to them, gives them a Bhagavad Gita and a Krishna book, tells them about the glories of Krishna, the glories of devotional service in such a way is that they purchase the Bhagavad Gita and the Krishna book. And that's the proper use of intelligence in relating to that particular couple. Rather than being killed by the man, he gets awarded by Krishna. Therefore, nirmana moha, nira, without mind, without materialistic conception, one has to hear the message of Krishna coming down as a simple succession, and therefore utilize that to control his mind and senses, the message of Krishna. If we don't utilize the intelligence and search our memory for what Krishna wants us to do, then we can't get free from let's put it positive. If we use our spiritual intelligence to search our memory, what Krishna wants us to do under these different circumstances, then the result is we'll get out of delusion and we won't be controlled by anger or greed or lust. Instead, we'll come under the spiritual energy and come in contact with Krishna. And instead of our intelligence diminishing, by such service, our senses, mind, and intelligence will become purified, and we become more and more Krishna conscious. So this getting free from false prestige and illusion and false association means that we have to cultivate a real ego by hearing that I'm Krishna's servant, everything here is meant for Krishna's service. And if I do that, and I become convinced, and I utilize my senses and mind and intelligence in Krishna's service, then the result is I'll remember Krishna. And if I remember Krishna, then in Krishna's presence, my senses, mind, intelligence will become purified, and I'll become Krishna conscious. And then it says here, that generally we're faced with the dualities, happiness and distress. So, if one becomes sufficiently Krishna conscious, one will not be disturbed by these dualities. And the dualities, instead of becoming obstacles for our advancement in Krishna consciousness, actually become causes of impetus, of inspiration to take more shelter of Krishna. Previously, people, in order to concentrate their minds on Vishnu or Brahman, whatever, Paramatma, they used to have to build fires all around and sit in the hot blazing sun to try to fix their mind on Krishna. Or sit in ice cold water in the winter up to their necks. We could also do that, but probably we'd faint after a couple of minutes. See if there was an air conditioner around. Or make sure we wore our thermal underwear into the ice cold water. So our methodology is to fix our minds upon Krishna, and by doing that, try to conquer over the dualities of happiness and distress, whatever. Otherwise, everyone says, my mind, sometimes I feel like this, and sometimes I feel like that. Every living entity in the material world sometimes feels like this or feels like that. But not every entity in the material world has an equal opportunity to remember Krishna and become undisturbed by whatever the mind is going through. So by practicing getting free from our misconceptions, by our false prestige, by accepting everything belongs to Krishna and utilizing Krishna's service, then by such practice we can learn to also tolerate the dualities of happiness and distress, and etc., and go on with our service despite any kind of feelings we may have or experiences. And then we'll become unbewildered. If we can tolerate happiness and distress, and fix our mind upon Krishna with concentration, then we'll be able to actually accept real devotional service. Our service will be done actually to please Krishna rather than to get out of happiness and distress. Or get into happiness and out of distress. This is what everyone in the material world is working for, 24 hours a day. But if these are not our motives, then we can actually accept pure devotional service, rise to the platform of understanding Krishna and truth with spiritual senses, and by the intensity of the happiness of Krishna consciousness, meditate in trance in love of Krishna. And also probably explains here that our whole identification with this body also extends itself to our nation, our family, etc., etc. We're also sources of false sentiment, which we have to practice getting over. As I've said before, even the birds don't have these delusions. If a bird flies in here from, say, Turkey, then the Romanian birds don't stop it at the border, saying, "You're a Turkish bird, where's your visa? Fly back to Turkey." So even the birds don't have such a deluded conception of life. So the human beings in modern society become even more bewildered by their family and societal and national identities. So these are all sorts of sources of false affection. So one has to also go beyond these misconceptions, these feelings that we think are so important. As I think I've said before, two people were talking to each other. They met each other on a trip in India. And one man says, "Where are you from?" He said, "I'm from Ireland." "Really? Amazing, I'm from Ireland. What a coincidence." And he said, Really, that's amazing. "And what part of Ireland?" "I'm from the south part." "Wow, I'm also from the south part. Really amazing meeting you here." "And what part?" "I'm from Cork." "Wow, I'm also from Cork. That's amazing. What a coincidence." "And what church do you attend?" I attend the New Revised Catholic Cork Revival Church." "Wow, that's amazing. I go to the same church. That's amazing." "Well, I belong to the 1918 revisionist platform of revisionist Catholic Church of Cork." He said, "Well, I belong to the 1917, and then revisionist part of that church." And then he takes out a gun and shoots him. He says, "Blasphemy, a heretic," and he shoots him. That's the nature of Kali Yuga. So we have to also get over those false, crazy feelings. Otherwise, ultimately, everyone else is bad, and I'm the only one who's left who's good. So I'll stop there. Any questions, comments? Yes.
What must I do in order for Your Holiness to accept me as a disciple?
Well, you can talk to whoever the authorities are here and ask them. They can tell you what their program is. Yeah. You can ask Sri Krishna Chaitanya there. He's the authority. I'm just his servant. Anything else? Yes.
What can we do if we don't have any inclination to surrender? We are rebellious by nature, except feeling sorry for ourselves.
Cry. So anyhow, live in the material world. Don't worry. It's Kali Yuga. You'll get inspired soon to surrender. This material world, no one gets out of it. It's such a place that no one gets out of it alive. Anything else? Yes.
I would like to ask if we are attracted to mundane activities, like the ones you mentioned, like people are attracted to climbing mountains or watching movies or all sorts of stuff. What should we do?
Cry. Well, we should understand we're unfortunate. We have all these tastes that we're attracted to. That's due to our conditioned nature. So we should recognize what they are. And if we can't give them up all at once, at least regulate them so that we don't cultivate them. It's like we're attracted to a little bit of poison, but now that we should pour a whole glass and drink it. So, and try to cultivate devotional service, try to get a higher taste. So gradually these attractions will go away. So we won't even remember them. Like if I gave you a free ticket to go to McDonald's and have a huge hamburger, would you get all excited and think, wow, thank you very much? I was hoping.
I like hamburgers, so.
Well, that's because you were a devotee in your last lifetime. Well, say we gave you an opportunity to go to a ski resort for 3 weeks and ski. And you went there and you broke your legs. So you went there, you experienced something, you'd probably lose your taste for it after some time. So, better is not to go there, but if you do have to go there, chant Hare Krishna while you're there, and try to, see it in relation to Krishna at least.
For example, if someone is inclined to listening to music or something like this, can he somehow engage this in Krishna consciousness and try to only listen to kirtan or something?
Yeah, of course. What else are they going to do? Take out their favorite album of, Mick Jagger or something? Think that Krishna's the sound of he's the sound and ether, so Mick Jagger screaming like like someone stepped on a cat's tail is Krishna, because Krishna is the sound and ether. No, of course we try to cultivate the higher taste. There's so many nice sounds of people chanting Hare Krishna. So many nice bhajans people actually have real feeling, rather than screaming out that they don't have sense gratification. Now, if people are attracted to sense gratification, they can really identify themselves with those things, because they can't get any satisfaction. But if someone is a devotee, then they shouldn't get involved in such things, because it's just illusory energy. The more you scream it out, the more you'll be in Maya. And the more you talk about how, because you're unhappy, because you're not separated from Krishna, well, that's good. And the more you feel separated from Krishna, the more you'll become happy. The more Krishna will become present. Anything else? Yes.
Krishna tells to Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita that from the very beginning he should curb this symbol of sin, lust, and also to try, by regulating the senses, to try to destroy, like he's using the word, try to slay this destroyer. How it is somehow we can engage this lust in Krishna service, or this?
Yeah, we eat prasadam. Sex and marriage is for propagating Krishna, for creating Krishna conscious children. When we go to sleep, we try to read Krishna books before we go to sleep, so we can dream about Krishna. And we fight for Krishna's cause, by trying to spread the Krishna consciousness movement, like Arjuna did. We try to defeat the forces of delusion and envy against Krishna. Anything else? Thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.